Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Tuesday. Today is March 31st, and thank you for joining me for another home learning math lesson. We are going to jump back into our SWON lessons this week. So for your independent practice work, you're going to recognize the format of the lessons again because your worksheets are going to look a lot like the ones in your math journal. Because that's exactly where they're coming from. So it should look pretty familiar to you. So we're going to start as usual with our objective. So our objective says, today I will equally partition rectangles into rows and columns. So I'm going to give you a moment and an opportunity to repeat that back to me. So I'll say it, I'll listen for you to repeat, and then I'll finish it up, and then listen again for you to repeat. All right, so today I will equally partition rectangles, your turn, okay, into rows and columns, your turn. All right, and I'll just repeat that one more time. So today we'll equally partition rectangles into rows and columns. So we have a few different vocabulary words to go over today. Some of them will be review words, words you've already learned before. Some of them are new. So the first word is easy. It's actually just rectangle, but you guys can see it up there in the objective. Of course, we learned all about rectangles in kindergarten and first grade and second grade during our geometry unit. So this is super familiar to you. But just remember that we talked about in our shape unit that rectangles can look like this, horizontal. Rectangles can also be drawn vertically, so kind of up and down. Rectangles can be any width, any size. So just a little review of rectangles, all right? And then the second word is a word we talked about last week. The second word is partition. Can you say partition? Your turn. Sounds good. So partition, remember, has a little chunk in it, a chunk that you should recognize. Does anyone remember what chunk in partition you should recognize? It gives you a clue about what the word partition means. Who thinks that they remember? If you think you remember, go ahead and show me thumbs up. And then go ahead and share out if you're sitting near someone. If you're not sitting near someone, go ahead and whisper it to me. What's that chunk again in partition that gives you a clue about what the word means? All right. I think I heard you say that the little chunk part gives you a clue about what the word partition means. So if you got that, if you remembered that, go ahead and gently tap yourself on the back. Give yourself a little pat on the back there. So the word partition actually just means to divide an object. It's when you divide an object into smaller shares. And shares is just a fancy math word for parts. So again, to partition just means to divide an object into smaller shares, which is just a fancy math word for parts, all right? Now, the next word, actually the next two words go together. Now, I'm going to write them both here, and then I'm going to explain them. So we have the word rows, which is plural. It could also just be row if we're talking about one row. And then we also have the word column, or columns if we're talking about more than one. Okay, so rows and columns. Everybody go ahead and repeat the word row. Okay, and then go ahead and repeat the word column. Nice job. So I'm going to model what this looks like, and then I'm going to explain to you using a picture what the difference is between rows and columns. So I start with a shape like this rectangle, and I'm going to divide it into rows, okay? So rows go from side to side, left to right. So now in this rectangle, I can see that I have one row and I have a second row, all right? So these sideways ones, these sideways shares are called rows. Now I'm also going to partition this rectangle into columns as well. So I'm going to try to make them as even as I can, not using a measuring tool, but it looks pretty good. So now I can see that I have 6 shares altogether, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but I still have 2 rows. So from left to right, I have 1 row and then a second row, but then I can also see that I actually have 3 columns. So I'm going to get down low here and write the word columns, and then I'm going to draw an arrow to each column. So you can see that I actually have 1, 2, 3 columns, okay? So these are the vocabulary words that you're going to need to know today in order to do your independent practice for today. Now, here is a lovely selfie of Miss Garcia, and you're probably wondering, Miss Garcia, why did you include a selfie of yourself in our math lesson today? Well, the reason is because I wanted to give you a way to remember the difference between rows and columns. So if you look up in the right-hand corner of this picture, you're going to notice that I have written the word eyebrow. At the end of the word eyebrow, there are 3 letters that are all capitalized, R-O-W. Now, you might recognize this word from our vocabulary list. Can you remember what R-O-W spells? If you said row, you're absolutely right. Now, in addition to the word eyebrow, I also have 2 arrows coming from the word, labeling my eyebrows. And I want you to take a look at this picture and figure out what direction do my eyebrows grow. You might even pause the video, run over to a mirror, check out your own face, and see how do your eyebrows grow. If you noticed that your eyebrows grow side to side, you're exactly right. And that's exactly why we have the word eyebrow labeled here on this picture, because eyebrows grow side to side just like rows in a shape when we're partitioning them. So eyebrows are a great way to help you remember that rows go side to side. Now, this photograph is of a structure called the Parthenon. The Parthenon can be found in Greece, and this structure was built thousands of years ago, so it's pretty amazing that it's actually still standing. Now, I want for you to study this picture closely. What do you notice about this structure that is really solidly standing still? What do you think? What parts of this structure look like they're really solid and they're really standing nicely, even today in 2020? Take a moment and think. What looks like it's really solidly standing still today in 2020? What part of this structure? Now, if you said those columns look like they're standing really nicely, you're exactly right. Now, those bars that are connecting the top of the structure to the bottom of the structure are called columns. Now, of course, thinking of structures like the Parthenon is a great way to remind yourself just what columns look like. Here on the Parthenon, you can see the columns going from top to bottom, keeping this structure standing tall. Now, just like when we partition shapes, columns go from top to bottom. All right, so now that I've gone over our objective and I've gone over some of our important vocabulary, I'm going to go ahead and model a couple of problems that are going to look just like yours today. So I always start at the top of the page where it says directions. The directions say partition to make equal parts. So what the directions are telling me to do is to separate or divide each of these shapes into equal parts. So I'm going to do my best to make them as equal as I can. So I've got two colors here. One color I'm going to use for columns and one color I'm going to use for rows. You can do that too if you have a couple of writing tools at home that are different colors. Otherwise, you can just do it with one color. So I'm going to model number 1 and I'm going to model number 2. Number 1 says partition this rectangle into 4 rows. So I'm going to do my best to make these equal. And I need to remember, what's the difference between columns and rows? Oh yeah, rows is in the word eyebrows. So I know that my eyebrows go side to side. So I can go ahead and draw lines that make this rectangle into rows. And I need 4 of them. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, remembering that eyebrows go from side to side. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the next part says partition this rectangle into 5 columns. So now I'm thinking of the Parthenon, this structure located in Greece. And I'm going to give this rectangle 5 columns just like the Parthenon. And I'm going to do my best to try to make these shares or parts as equal as I can. Just like in number 1, it didn't come out perfectly because I'm not using any measuring tools to make sure that each share is going to be exactly the same size, but I'm going to do my best. So I need 5 columns. So I'm going to just start in the middle. And I'm doing my line from top to bottom, just like the columns on the Parthenon. So I have 2 shares right now. I need to have 5 shares. So 1, 2. Okay, I have 1, 2, and then a really big one, so 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, my shares didn't come out perfectly equal, and that's okay, but I'm going to do my best on the rest of my journal pages today to make sure that my shares are equal as I can make them, okay? And then I always double check to make sure I have enough shares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it said to partition this rectangle into 5 columns. I have 5 shares and they're in the same shape as a column, so from top to bottom, 5 of them all together. All right, so now that I've modeled a couple of problems for you, you're all set to get started on your independent practice pages. Now, before I explain what to do for those and what your options are, I want to just let you know that for the past week, you've been submitting your work to me on Seesaw in the form of a photo. Now, you're going to continue to post your math work to me on Seesaw, but instead of posting a photo, you're actually going to be posting a video, and you're going to be doing a math presentation for me to look at. Now, I'll give you directions on Seesaw for that assignment, and it's going to be included as a student template. So you'll just have to click the template on Seesaw where it says math. Tuesday, March 31st, and then you're going to add in your video there. So I'll give you directions on Seesaw for that when you're ready. But as far as finding your work goes, you have 3 options today, which you will find in Google Classroom as usual. So option 1 is to print off the worksheets and complete them by hand using pencils, okay? Well, a pencil. Option 2 is going to be to do your work on Google Drawings, so it's going to be called option 2 on Google Classroom. And then option 3 is to complete this Seesaw assignment on Seesaw. So I'll snap photos of today's worksheets and post them on Seesaw, so that is your third option. Now, whichever option you choose, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have to do a student presentation, a math presentation on Seesaw. So decide which of those math assignments you want to complete, option 1, 2, or 3, and then afterwards, everyone is going to head over to Seesaw to do a math presentation. So directions for that part will be on Seesaw for math presentations. All right?